If you ask somebody what their favourite old school gaming playthrough series on YouTube would be, a lot of people will say some form of Minecraft series. Whether that be the Yogscast or Tobuscus or even Hat Films, somebody will say some sort of Minecraft thing. Now me personally, back in the day, I used to love KSI. Now this was long before he stopped making content and pretended to rap. This series that he did back in the day was his Dead Space 2 series. For me, this was like crack. I only have good memories of it, and for some reason, I was thinking about it the other day, and I thought, let's go on the Steam Workshop page and see what Dead Space mods there are. And today's mod popped up. The Dead Space Equipment mod. I saw this mod and I thought, yeah, let's scratch this itch I've got for Dead Space and see how good it is. So let's get into things and get into the content. So let's start with the content of the Steam Workshop page. What is there and what do we see? So we start off with the thumbnail of the mod, really nice and very clean. We have a couple of images of the actual items added by this mod. Getting into the bulk of things, this is it. There's not very much here. We have a list of the items added by the mod. There isn't actually every single item here. There is one more that's not included here. Compatibility and the credits. I would love to see some pictures of everything in game the way it looks. There needs to even be mentioning of the custom sounds that we're going to be looking into. The Steam Workshop page here is lackluster. Really want to see just a little bit more depth, a little bit more detail, and this would be amazing. So what does this content look like in game? This mod adds 6 brand new weapons and 4 new pieces of armor, all crafted at the fabrication bench. We have the 211V plasma cutter, the C99 contact beam, the PFM 100 flamethrower, SWS pulse rifle, the handheld graviton accelerator, the seeker rifle, and moving on to the armor with the engineer rig, headgear and armor, and then we have the military rig, headgear and armor. So there's a small variety here, kind of going to be split into the working tools, and then we have the more military weapons and armor as well. So how do all these brand new weapons actually work? So let's go through and look at all of them very quickly to show off what they do. So the standard bolt cutter shoots rather a large bullet here and hits the target. The contact beam is basically a grenade launcher. This one has a very small radius of effect and is obviously quite inaccurate because it's pretty much a grenade launcher, but there's a hell of a lot of damage on contact. Next, we have the flamethrower, and funnily enough, this does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a flamethrower, it sets things on fire. Doesn't do very much damage though. Next, the graviton accelerator. This does an extremely small amount of damage very quickly with extremely good accuracy at a very short range. This one is probably the most interesting weapon that's been added here and definitely the coolest. Next, we have the pulse rifle. This one shoots extremely fast with a very high amount of range. This one is very powerful. And lastly, the Seeker rifle. This one is basically a sniper rifle, ridiculous amount of range and an extremely beefy shot that comes out of it and it destroys the target. Those are all the weapons that have been added here, and as you can tell, they are all extremely unique and very Dead Space. Full marks for these actual weapons and equipment here. Next, let's move on and look at the armors. So we have the engineer rig armor and we have the military rig armor. Both of these, very interestingly, come with the ability to heal yourself. At the beginning of the content section where I was in the Steam Workshop page, I mentioned there was an item that wasn't added here. This is the med pack that is then reloadable into the armor here, and you can instantly use that to heal your colonists. A very powerful ability that is limited by the availability of these med packs. So if you've got a lot of these in storage, you can theoretically heal somebody extremely quickly. But only 2 uses is the way to balance this. A really cool concept here, and I really like the way this works. So these med packs are exclusively available to use within the armors. We can't pick these up and give them to somebody because they're pretty much instant healing. These can only be used within the armor, which makes them extremely limited in use and makes them very niche. So yes, they might seem a little bit on the more powerful side, but you can only be using them with the armor that's added by this mod, which is fantastic. These are made at the drugs lab, which is obviously then accessed through medicine and everything. So that's going to be it for the content section here, and this is a very solid amount of content here. There's a very safe amount of things going on here, and everything is very decent. I've got nothing that's too high to say about this mod, and I've got nothing that's necessarily negative about this mod. Obviously, the Steam Workshop page definitely needs some improvement there, and honestly, with the content here, whilst it is solid and it is decent and there is literally nothing to fault about it, I could argue and say we just need a little bit more for the theming of Dead Space. I feel like we could definitely have a custom workbench here. I feel like we could definitely have the inclusion of necromorphs and things. Maybe there's another mod that adds this, would be really perfect to use in tandem with this. Otherwise, we're kind of left like, well, where's the Dead Space here? You know, it's a very solid mod for what it provides, but for the theming of Dead Space, I just want a little bit more. That's just me personally though. So for content here, very solid. could do with a little bit more. Steam Workshop page definitely needs improvements. A very solid 8 out of 10 here. Next, let's move on and look at the quality of the items added by this mod, and as you can tell already, the quality is extremely high here. I don't need to go into things and look at them to show you how good this mod is in terms of quality, but zooming in on all the items here, just to really show it off, the attention to detail here is sublime. I love to see all the individual little lines and dots here, just to really show what the individual weapons added by Dead Space look like here, and I think it goes a really long way in really showing off the mod here. I love the attention to detail on the armors as well, to show the lighting on the actual helmet and everything, and I love the way that the armor actually looks itself, and it's just what it looks like from Dead Space. The attention to detail here combined with the texture quality makes for an amazing looking mod here. So next, let's look at the actual sound effects. Now, very unlike pretty much any other mod I've covered in recent memory, the custom sounds here are a welcome addition here. Really sets this mod apart from pretty much any other mod, and obviously sets it apart from base game vanilla Rimworld. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stay quiet, and we're going to listen to every single sound provided by the weapons, and I'm going to kind of go through my favorites here. So all of the individual animations and sound effects for these weapons here are incredible. They are so attentive to the individual bits of detail here. I love the way they all work and the way they all sound here. Personally for me, the Graviton Accelerator is by far my favorite here. I love the way it just blows people away, and honestly, I wish it was doing a bit more blowing, if you get what I mean, because it's so satisfying to look at, and it's just not really doing much on the receiver here. It's just something you can just use over and over again and just keep blowing. You see where I'm coming from here. I also really like the Seeker rifle here, nice and beefy and bassy. I love the way it almost feels like I am hitting them in-game with the sniper rifle, and a little bit more mature in the way it's acting. So overall here for the quality here, I'm very impressed. It's some of the best quality I've seen, and it is definitely what I'm expecting, if not more, of a mod this size. So for quality here, I think I'm going to very comfortably give this a 10 out of 10. So next, let's move on and look at the balancing of the items added by this mod. Now, before we get into this, I want to give a bit of context as to what the Dead Space universe is to those who aren't quite aware. In Dead Space, what we do is we are on spaceships and we're in space and things. Funnily enough, that's the whole point of the game. And what we're doing is we are killing aliens and things that take over people's bodies, and generally speaking, they are very powerful. Now, with that in mind, what we're going to be kind of expecting here is that all the weapons added by this mod are going to be very powerful. So the balancing section here is going to be quite difficult to determine as to how you're going to be fitting this in with vanilla Rimworld, but we're going to kind of do our best and base our assumptions off that. So before we get into actually looking at the powerfulness of things, let's look at how easy it is to access these weapons by looking at the research cost. So looking at the research tree, every single weapon that's added by this mod and every single piece of armor has the prerequisite of fabrication as a baseline. In order to access all of the armors, we have to have recon armor. In order to access the military weapons, we have to have pulse charged munitions. So with that in mind, everything is pretty late game, honestly. It's not something where we have easy access to early in our game, and it's something that we're going to have to work towards throughout our entire playthrough. So we need to bear that in mind throughout this. This is all very late tech, and in terms of how good it is, we're assuming that the military weapons are going to be significantly better than the engineering tools, which are going to be worse. So let's start by comparing the damage and using it against a Gore Hulk. What we're going to be doing is shooting at a Gore Hulk that I've set free here and kind of seeing how much damage everything does. So let's start with the basic bolt gun. So firstly, the bolt cutter. This one does a decent amount of damage, and as we're chasing down the Gore Hulk as it runs away, it's actually destroying limbs and it's doing a hell of a lot of damage. Now, this is theoretically the weakest weapon that's in this mod apart from the flamethrower and the Graviton Accelerator. It's kind of doing what I'm expecting here. Nothing too much, nothing too little, but it's still quite a powerful weapon. So far, so good. Next, we have the contact beam, and like I explained in the content section, this one is kind of weirdly inaccurate but accurate at the same time. Very small blast radius, therefore we have to hit the target straight on in order to do any damage. And because of that, it does actually take quite a while to kill. but when we do actually hit the target, it does a hell of a lot of damage. This one I think is also fairly balanced. Does a lot of damage though, I could maybe see that turned down just a little bit. So next, let's move on and look at the Graviton Accelerator. Now this one is my favourite weapon added by this mod. I love the way it sounds, I love the way it looks, the animations are amazing. But holy moly, does this thing put out damage. Never would I thought that a weapon that's entire purpose is blowing things away would do this much damage. This gore skin has been blown so hard, it's just gone down. Hold on. But yeah, it's really powerful. The incredible amount of accuracy, and paired with the fact that it shoots really quickly, there's a hell of a lot of burnt damage being put out here that's downing people really, really quickly. This one I could definitely see a reduce in fire rate. And then we have the flamethrower, and I mean, it shoots quickly. That's about the only positive I've got from this. I don't know why, but the flamethrowers in every mod that I ever see, they're notoriously bad. Yes, this one shoots quickly to make up for the fact of it, and yes, it sets fire to it and then does lasting fire damage, but it just seems a bit underwhelming, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I mean, if we were gonna use this in Dead Space against loads of xenomorph insecty things, it would probably be really powerful. I would really like the flamethrower buffed just a little bit more, honestly, just so I can be more satisfied that I've set something on fire and I'm destroying it. Next, we have the Pulse Rifle. This is just the most insane amount of damage being put out so quickly. This one, in order to fit with the base game vanilla Rimworld, needs a nerf. This is crazy powerful. 2 bursts and the Gore Hulk is down and out, losing one of its toes as well. Like, crazy powerful. And next we have the Seeker Rifle. Now obviously we're at a very close range here, and I could have put the Seeker Rifle at the max amount of range here and we could test it out here. In my mind, if we're testing out Dead Space weapons, it has to be in close quarters in order to really emulate what it was like in the game. So what I've done is obviously put them at a very short range, and the first shot is a headshot. Okay, fair enough. The next shot's also a headshot and blows off its head. What? Only hitting headshots? That's ridiculous. This gun is also very, very powerful, but it's satisfying. So maybe I'll let it off. Maybe not. So there we have it. That is all of the weapons added by this mod. We have the engineering work weapons and we have the military weapons. The military weapons are definitely better. The Pulse Rifle and the Seeker Rifle are extremely good. But very interestingly, all of the engineering weapons are also extremely powerful. Yes, the flamethrower is a bit shit, but it's still, you know, setting people on fire and it's doing a lot of burn damage from that. And yes, the initial bolt cutter thing doesn't really do too much damage either, but it's also very beefy and does a decent amount of damage against a Gore Hulk. So all of the weapons added by this mod, generally speaking, I'd say are quite powerful and honestly on a bit more overpowered side, regardless of how long it takes to access them through tech. So next, let's check out and see how good the armor that's added by this mod actually is. Now what I've done is I've looked at the research tree and see that recon armor is the prerequisite. So what we're going to be doing is comparing all of the armor added by this mod to the recon armor. Starting with the actual armor piece itself, recon armor is better than the engineering military rig as well, and it is then worse than the military rig armor, putting it better than the engineering and not as good as the military armor. This actually makes a lot of sense when you look at the way that the recon armor has no extra offsets, whereas the engineering armor and the military armor have toxic resistance and the engineering armor has a work speed benefit. This makes sense and I think this works quite nicely. Next, looking at the headgear. Once again, the recon helmet does better than the engineering rig headgear, and then it doesn't do as good as the military rig headgear as well. This, once again, makes sense, and for the exact same reasons for the armor. So you can kind of see that the armor is extremely well balanced in my opinion. So next, let's check out the resource cost here. Generally, what I'm expecting here is that everything is going to be quite expensive. We're putting out a hell of a lot of damage here, and it's obviously very late in tech. The expectation here is that everything is going to cost a few advanced components, some plasteel, steel, components, and uranium. Very expensive recipes I'm expecting here. Looking at the engineering rig armor and the military rig armor as well, both of these require some plasteel, devil strand very interestingly, and advanced components. I think the resource cost here is pretty accurate. I could argue and say that we could see some steel cost here, some uranium cost here, just to make things feel a little bit more high tech, but still, I think the resource cost for the armor here is perfect. Looking at the weapons, however, this is where things get a little bit confusing. All of the weapons here pretty much only require a little bit of steel, some plasteel, and a couple of advanced components. Now, I think this makes sense for the vanilla weapons. I think that makes perfect sense for the vanilla stuff. But for this that's modded and it's extremely powerful, I'm not too sure about this one, Chief. I think the plasteel cost is, you know, good. I like the advanced component cost being involved. I would definitely like to see it more, and I think the steel cost is pretty okay as well. The advanced component cost for me is just way too low. It needs to be at least double, if not more, and I'd love to see a uranium cost involved here as well. I think the only recipe here that makes the most sense here is the flamethrower, because it's not that good. I think the recipe for that is perfect, but the rest of them, we just need these to be a little bit hard to access. Now, as you can see as well, all of these items have a skill requirement of 12 in crafting in order to get them. I think that's a really good barrier to access here, and I really like the way that's been implemented. But I think at the stage of the game that you're going to be at when you've got access to this stuff, you're definitely going to have a crafter of a level 12 here. The resource cost is the only way that I can see this being imbalanced and needs to be improved. So that's it for the balancing section, and let's start by looking at the things that I think are balanced. I think all of the armors are extremely balanced. I think the engineering rig and I think the military rig, the armor and the headgear are completely balanced. I think they make great sense, and I think they're incredibly good additions to vanilla Rimworld. I think they are perfect. The balancing for resources, the tech cost, everything makes sense for those, and I really like the way they've been implemented. I also like the way that every single recipe in this mod has been skill locked at the minimum of 12 in crafting before you can make them. I think that's a really good barrier to entry, and it's something that a lot of modders don't implement, and I love the way it's been used in this mod. I also actually really like the way that this mod has been put after fabrication, and I love the way that we've got pulse charge munitions being required, and I love the way recon armor is also being required. Just a few more barriers to entry here to really stop you from accessing this really good technology. Now, what do I not think is balanced? Every single weapon in this mod is, apart from the flamethrower, is unbalanced. They're all overpowered, and I think they're extremely good. Now, obviously, in these reviews, I like to compare everything to base game vanilla Rimworld, and comparing these two together, it's no question. I'll be using everything added by this mod and nothing in vanilla. It's too overpowered. I think the resource cost is too low, and I also think that the damage output is way too high for vanilla Rimworld. And I'm going to keep emphasizing that comparing this to vanilla Rimworld and base game vanilla Rimworld, this mod is too overpowered. I think in certain mod packs, however, this mod is actually really balanced. If you're using this with Void and things like that that are a little bit more on the hardcore side, a little bit more powerful, then I can definitely see this mod working. So overall, for the balancing, there's a few things I like about this mod that are really balanced, but there's some glaringly obvious things that I think are very overpowered. So for balancing here, I'm going to give it 5 out of 10, because it's kind of 50-50 as to what's overpowered and what isn't overpowered, in my opinion. So next, let's move on and look at the compatibility of this mod. Are there any bugs I need to let you know about, and how this fit in with your playthroughs? Now, in terms of bugs, I had absolutely no issues whatsoever. Everything worked effectively. The med packs and everything worked as when we activated those. Everything is really good within that, no issues at all. Looking on the Steam Workshop page, also, nobody's reported any issues whatsoever, apart from a couple of people that are using this with other mods and have got issues with that. I'd imagine if you're using this with Save Our Ship 2, which has compatibility for this mod, there could be some issues there just because it's, you know, another mod with another mod, and you'd have to just take that with a pinch of salt. And then how this work within your playthroughs. Now, obviously a Dead Space themed mod will not work in the tribal era, nor will it work in the medieval era, and nor will it even really work in the industrial Rimworld era. This mod is perfect for the spacer era and going into space and doing all those things with the sci-fi theme in mind. And then obviously, because this is a Dead Space themed mod, we are then going to be limited even further, because if we want to use a mod that's about fluffy bunnies and anime, the Dead Space stuff doesn't really work. And that's going to be kind of a thing that we're going to see with the mod recommendations as well. The theming of this mod and the way that it's set in the future then limits this mod so much. I think there's a big benefit though of this mod is that it's compatible with Save Our Ship 2. Save Our Ship 2 is a massive mod, I absolutely love it, so you can throw it in with that mod and have the compatibility with that, which is amazing. So for compatibility, no bugs, perfect. But the way this is going to work in your playthroughs, it's quite limited. I'm not thinking of too many playthroughs that I think this would work in, but obviously if you have suggestions, leave them in the comments and let me know. So for compatibility, I'm going to be giving it, once again, 5 out of 10. It's just too limited in what you can use this with, and I can't necessarily see this work with too many things. So next, let's move on, look at my mod recommendations to go with this mod. Now what I've done here is I've picked mods that are kind of horror themed, mods that fit really well the Anomaly DLC, and mods that generally speaking are a little bit more spooky, provide a little bit of tension to your playthroughs, and aren't going to make things easier for you. So starting with Horrors by Mlee, this one's been updated recently and been given 1.5 compatibility. New Anomaly threats, just to give you more things in the Anomaly DLC to do. Save Our Ship 2, obviously, because it's got compatibility there. And then we've got Lethal Darkness, so we can make things even darker. And then going with that, we've obviously then got Realistic Darkness to make things even darker. You could potentially throw in all of the vanilla expanded insect stuff with the vanilla expanded Insectoids 2 if you wanted something that was just about exterminating insects, but I don't feel like that's necessarily Dead Space themed, and I feel like it's a little bit too happy. I feel like Dead Space needs just horror, and it needs just so much more dread than the stuff added by Oscar and everything, which always feels a little bit more happy and go Larry. So for mod recommendations, you're looking at a very niche playthrough. If you're going to be running the Anomaly DLC, which I also kind of recommend with this mod, you're basically going to want to use this mod as well. If you're running a very sort of Anomaly DLC themed playthrough, this mod is great for that because you're going to be exterminating creatures and things like that, which is just like Dead Space. So for mod recommendations, I think, despite what I said in the compatibility section of there's not too many playthroughs, the playthroughs you're going to be getting out of it are going to be very specific, and I think they're going to be actually really good for the Dead Space vibe. So for mod recommendations, I'm going to be giving this a 6 out of 10. So now for my conclusion, where am I at with this? I think overall this mod is a very solid addition to the modding community. I think the Dead Space theme, now with the Anomaly DLC stuff, fits really, really well. But that's almost as far as I'm going to go with that. The Anomaly DLC stuff, for me personally, is the weakest of the DLCs added by Rimworld, and the fact that this mod kind of only fits with that in mind is a little bit of a downside here. Whilst I really appreciate the way everything's been implemented, I love the quality here, and I love how much content's actually been added, it's great. But it's too niche, and I think that is a little bit of a problem here. I think if we had some more Dead Space mods on the Steam Workshop page that give us more of a depth and breadth to what we're going to be able to play with, it would be even better, and I wouldn't have necessarily scored it so low in the compatibility and mod recommendations section. So for content, I gave it 8 out of 10, quality 10 out of 10, balancing 5 out of 10, compatibility 5 out of 10, my mod recommendation score 6 out of 10, giving it 34 out of 50, which is a very respectable B-rated mod. Don't get me wrong, I really do like this mod, and I can definitely see me using this in a Save Our Ship 2 playthrough and maybe making things a little bit more spooky and hardcore. But it doesn't work well enough in enough areas that I can say, yeah, you need to check this out. This is one of those few occasions where I'm going to be a little bit more hesitant as to recommend this mod to you guys. But obviously, if you're using Save Our Ship 2, if you're doing an Anomaly playthrough, I can see this mod working extremely well in those situations, which are a little bit niche, as you can kind of see. But don't listen to my opinion, make sure you check out this mod for yourself and generate your own opinion. So if you haven't liked today's video, consider liking, subscribing, and make sure you tell your mum about me. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.